The rain had already soaked through Cleo Brooks's shoes by the time she reached the back parking lot of the Horizon corporate tower. Her curly hair clung to her cheeks, her bag strap was digging into her shoulder, and she had just spent the entire afternoon being blamed for a scheduling mistake she didn't make. Her patience snapped somewhere between the broken elevator and the insult from a senior analyst who accused her of being unqualified to even sit at the front desk. So when she saw a man leaning against a black sedan in the shadows, she didn't care who he was. She needed one moment, just one, of being human again. "You ever feel like people just walk right over you?" she muttered, rubbing her forehead. "Like no matter how hard you try, you're always the easiest person to blame?" The stranger lifted his eyes, sharp, observant, quiet, but he didn't interrupt. "I swear, some days I feel like I'm holding this whole building together with tape and prayer. And for what? So people can yell at me because I can't magically fix their incompetence." He blinked, still silent, still listening. "And the worst part, nobody even knows my name. I'm just the girl at the desk. I don't matter. Not to them, not to anyone." A beat of stillness hung in the air. Then the stranger spoke, voice low and steady. "You matter." Cleo froze. It wasn't flirtatious, it wasn't condescending, just true. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," he said. Lightning cracked overhead, briefly illuminating his face. Sharp jawline, dark eyes, a presence that felt too controlled, too powerful to belong to an ordinary man. But Cleo was too tired to overthink. "Thanks, whoever you are." He didn't answer, because telling her the truth, that he was Ji Woo-han, the silent owner of Horizon Tower, and the Korean Mafia boss whose syndicate operated beneath the city's polished corporate skin, would have changed everything. Welcome to Korean Mafia lovers. Before we dive into this incredible story of unexpected love and dangerous secrets, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring you more passionate stories like this one. Cleo Brooks had been invisible for so long, she'd almost forgotten what it felt like to be seen. 3 years at Horizon Corporate Tower, 3 years of 12-hour shifts behind a reception desk that might as well have been a prison cell. 3 years of being blamed for other people's mistakes, yelled at for problems she didn't create, and treated like a piece of furniture that occasionally spoke. The morning after her breakdown in the parking lot, Cleo arrived at work expecting nothing to change. The same fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The same marble floors reflected her worn sneakers. The same executives swept past her desk without acknowledgement. But something was different. Her supervisor, Daniel Rhodes, wasn't hovering over her shoulder with his usual list of complaints. The coffee machine in the break room had been fixed, something she'd been requesting for months. And when she opened her desk drawer to grab a pen, she found a small package wrapped in plain brown paper. Inside was a travel mug, simple, black, with a note written in careful handwriting, "For someone who holds buildings together." Cleo's chest tightened. She glanced around the lobby, searching for any sign of who might have left it, but the morning rush continued around her, oblivious, the stranger from the parking lot. It had to be. But how had he gotten into the building? How did he know where she worked? And why did the thought of him remembering their conversation make her stomach flutter instead of terrify her? Brooks. Daniel's voice cut through her thoughts like a blade. He stormed across the lobby, his face flushed with the particular shade of red that meant someone important had yelled at him, and now he needed someone to yell at in return. "The Henderson meeting got moved to conference room B, and they're saying nobody told them. How do you explain that?" Cleo pulled up the scheduling system on her computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "I sent the notification yesterday at 3:47 p.m. It went to Mr. Henderson's assistant, his secretary, and the entire project team. Well, clearly you didn't." "I can show you the delivery confirmations if you'd like." Daniel's mouth snapped shut. Cleo had never interrupted him before, never offered proof, never stood her ground. She wasn't sure what had changed. Maybe it was the stranger's words echoing in her head. "You matter." Maybe it was the travel mug sitting on her desk like evidence that someone, somewhere, had actually listened to her. Or maybe she was just tired of being small. "Just fix it," Daniel muttered, stalking away. Cleo exhaled slowly, her hands trembling slightly. She'd won that round, but victory felt fragile. Daniel would be back, and next time he'd be armed with something she couldn't disprove. The elevator chimed, and Cleo looked up to see a man in maintenance coveralls stepping out. Tall, lean, moving with the kind of controlled grace that suggested he was stronger than he looked. Their eyes met across the lobby. Cleo's breath caught. It was him. The stranger from the parking lot. He approached her desk with measured steps, a tablet in his hand and a tool belt around his waist. Up close, she could see details the rain had hidden: sharp cheekbones, dark eyes that seemed to catalogue everything they saw, and an air of quiet authority that didn't match his maintenance uniform. "Morning," he said, his voice carrying that same steady quality that had calmed her in the storm. "I'm here to check the elevator systems. There have been some complaints about delays." Cleo nodded, trying to keep her expression professional even as her pulse quickened. "Of course. Do you need me to call ahead to any of the floors? That would be helpful." She reached for her phone, but her hand brushed against the travel mug and she froze. Their eyes met again, and she saw the slightest hint of a smile touch his lips. "Nice mug," he said quietly. Heat flooded her cheeks. "Thank you. Someone left it for me." "They have good taste." The simple words carried weight that made her chest tight. Cleo cleared her throat, focusing on her computer screen. "I'll call the floors now." As she made the calls, she was acutely aware of him standing beside her desk. He didn't fidget or check his phone like most people did. He simply waited, patient and still, occasionally glancing at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. When she finished, he nodded his thanks and headed toward the elevator bank. But just before the doors closed, he looked back at her. "Cleo," he said softly. She startled. She hadn't told him her name. Her nameplate faced away from where he'd been standing, and Daniel had only called her Brooks. "How did you—" But the elevator doors slid shut, leaving her alone with a dozen new questions, and the unsettling realization that the stranger who'd listened to her breakdown knew more about her than she'd thought. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of phone calls and scheduling conflicts, but Cleo couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, not in a threatening way, more like someone was making sure she was okay. During her lunch break, she took the elevator to the roof. It was her secret escape, a place where she could eat her sandwich in peace and pretend she wasn't trapped in a building that treated her like she was disposable. She pushed open the heavy door and stepped into the afternoon sunlight, expecting to find the rooftop empty as usual. Instead, she found him. The maintenance man, her mysterious stranger, was crouched beside an air conditioning unit, his tool belt spread out on the concrete beside him. He looked up when she appeared, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. "Sorry," Cleo said finally. "I didn't know anyone was up here. I can go—" "Stay." The word was quiet but firm. "There's room for both of us." Cleo hesitated, then walked to her usual spot near the edge of the roof. The city spread out below them, a maze of glass and steel that looked almost beautiful from this height. She unwrapped her sandwich and tried to ignore the way her awareness of him seemed to electrify the air between them. "You come up here often?" he asked, not looking away from his work. "Every day. It's the only place in this building where I can breathe." He nodded as if he understood exactly what she meant. "What made you choose this job?" Cleo laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Choice? That's generous. I needed work. They needed someone who could answer phones and look professional. It wasn't exactly a career aspiration. What was?" The question caught her off guard. When was the last time someone had asked her about her dreams? "I wanted to be a social worker, help kids in the system. I was in foster care myself, so I thought maybe I could make a difference." "What stopped you?" "Life." Cleo took a bite of her sandwich, chewing slowly. "Foster care doesn't exactly set you up for college success. By the time I aged out, I was more focused on surviving than thriving." She glanced at him, expecting to see pity or discomfort. Instead, his expression was thoughtful, almost respectful. "Survival takes strength," he said. "Not everyone has it." Something warm unfurled in Cleo's chest. "What about you? always wanted to fix air conditioners. His lips quirked in what might have been a smile. Something like that. They fell into comfortable silence, the city humming below them. Cleo found herself stealing glances at him, noting the way he moved with precision and purpose, the way his hands looked both gentle and capable. When her break was over, she stood to leave. "Thank you," she said, "for listening the other night, and for this." He looked up at her, his dark eyes serious. "Thank you for trusting me." As Cleo walked back to the elevator, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just crossed some invisible line. The stranger wasn't just someone she'd vented to in a moment of weakness anymore. He was becoming someone she wanted to know, and that terrified her almost as much as it thrilled her. For the next week, Cleo found herself looking forward to work for the first time in years. Not because anything had fundamentally changed about her job. Daniel was still a nightmare. The executives still treated her like wallpaper, and the pay was still barely enough to cover her studio apartment in the city's cheapest neighborhood. But the maintenance man kept appearing, in the elevator when she was running late, in the stairwell when she needed to escape Daniel's latest tirade, on the roof during her lunch breaks, always working on something that required his quiet, focused attention. They talked. Small conversations at first, about the weather, the building's quirks, the way the afternoon light hit the windows just right. But gradually the conversations deepened. Cleo learned that he'd grown up far from here, in a place where family expectations weighed heavy, and choices were often made for you rather than by you. She learned that he understood what it meant to feel trapped by circumstances beyond your control. She didn't learn his name. Every time she asked, he deflected with a question of his own, turning the focus back to her with the skill of someone who was used to keeping secrets. It should have bothered her more than it did. Instead, she found herself charmed by his mystery, drawn to the way he listened, like her words mattered. "You're different," she told him one afternoon as they sat on the roof, sharing the bag of chips she'd brought from the vending machine. "Different how? Most people don't really listen. They wait for their turn to talk, or they're already thinking about what they want to say next. But you hear me." He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Maybe because I know what it's like to feel unheard." There was something in his voice, a weight that suggested deeper pain than he was letting on. Cleo wanted to ask, wanted to understand what had put that shadow in his eyes, but she'd learned to recognize when he was approaching the boundaries of what he was willing to share. Instead, she offered him the last of the chips and changed the subject to something safer. It was Thursday when everything shifted. Cleo was working late, trying to catch up on the scheduling chaos Daniel had created by double-booking 3 conference rooms for the same time slot. The lobby was empty except for the security guard, who was making his rounds on the upper floors. She was so focused on her computer screen that she didn't notice the man approaching her desk until he cleared his throat. Cleo looked up to find a stranger in an expensive suit standing in front of her. He was young, maybe early 30s, with the kind of polished appearance that screamed money and entitlement. His smile was too wide, too practiced. "Working late?" he asked, his eyes traveling over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "Can I help you?" Cleo kept her voice professional, but every instinct was telling her something was wrong. "I'm looking for someone. Thought maybe you could help me find him." "I'm sorry, but building access is restricted after hours. If you'd like to schedule an appointment..." "Oh, I don't think he has an office here." The man leaned against her desk, invading her space. "More of a behind-the-scenes kind of guy. Goes by Jiwoo Han." "Ring any bells?" Cleo's blood chilled. The name was familiar. She'd heard it whispered in the break room, seen it in news articles about organized crime in the city. Jiwoo Han was supposedly the head of one of the most powerful Korean syndicates on the East Coast. "I don't know anyone by that name," she said carefully. The man's smile sharpened. "That's funny, because I have it on good authority that he's been spending a lot of time in this building lately. And you're the kind of person who notices things, aren't you, Cleo?" Her name in his mouth sounded like a threat. Cleo's hand moved slowly toward the panic button under her desk, but the man caught the movement. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," he said softly. "I'm not here to hurt anyone. I just want to have a conversation with Mr. Han, Professional courtesy, you understand. I told you, I don't— Cleo. The voice came from behind her, low and controlled. Cleo turned to see her maintenance man emerging from the elevator bank, his tool belt gone, his coveralls replaced by dark jeans and a black jacket. But it wasn't his clothes that had changed. It was everything else. His posture was different, straighter, more commanding. His expression was harder, more dangerous, and when he looked at the man in the suit, there was something in his eyes that made Cleo's breath catch, recognition and fury. "Chul Min," he said, his voice carrying an edge that could cut glass. "You're a long way from your territory." The man, Chul Min, straightened, his practiced smile faltering. "Jiwoo, I was hoping we could talk." Cleo's world tilted. Jiwoo. Her mysterious maintenance man was Jiwoo Han, the Korean Mafia boss whose name was whispered in fear and respect throughout the city. The man who'd listened to her vent about her terrible day was one of the most dangerous people in the state. "We have nothing to discuss," Jiwoo said, moving to stand between Cleo and Chul Min. "And you have no business being here." "Actually, I think we have quite a bit to discuss." Chul Min's eyes flicked to Cleo and his smile returned. "Especially about your new interests." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Cleo could feel the tension radiating off Jiwoo like heat from a furnace. "Leave," Jiwoo said quietly. "Now." "Or what? You'll make a scene in your own building?" Chul Min laughed. "I don't think so. You've got too much to lose now." His gaze lingered on Cleo again, and she understood the implication. She wasn't just a witness to this conversation. She was leverage. "Cleo," Jiwoo said without turning around, "go home. I can't just leave. Go home." His voice was firm, but not unkind. "Please." Cleo looked between the two men, her mind racing. Every survival instinct she'd developed in foster care was screaming at her to run, to get as far away from this situation as possible. But another part of her, the part that had been drawn to Jiwoo's quiet strength, his careful attention, his unexpected kindness, refused to abandon him. "I'm not leaving you alone with him," she said quietly. Jiwoo's shoulders tensed. "Cleo." "She's smart," Chul Min interrupted. "Knows when she's in over her head. Don't you, sweetheart?" The condescending endearment made Cleo's temper flare. She'd been talked down to and dismissed her entire life. But something about this man's smug superiority pushed her past her breaking point. "Actually," she said, standing up and moving to stand beside Jiwoo, "I know when someone's trying to intimidate me, and I don't intimidate easily." Chul Min's expression darkened. "You should be more careful about the company you keep." "So should you," Cleo shot back. For a moment the lobby was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Then Chul Min laughed, but there was no humor in it. "This is interesting," he said, looking between Cleo and Jiwoo. "Very interesting indeed." He straightened his suit jacket and headed toward the exit, but paused at the door. "We'll continue this conversation soon, Jiwoo. And next time, maybe we'll have more privacy." The threat hung in the air long after he disappeared into the night. Cleo turned to face Jiwoo, her heart hammering against her ribs. "You're him. You're actually him." Jiwoo's expression was unreadable. "Yes." "The Korean Mafia boss everyone's afraid of." "Yes." "And you've been pretending to be a maintenance worker." "Yes." Cleo stared at him, trying to reconcile the man who'd listened to her problems with the legend she'd heard whispered about in dark corners. "Why? Because I needed to understand what was happening in my building? And because—" He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his features. "Because when you talked to me that night, you weren't afraid. You were just honest. And I couldn't remember the last time someone had been honest with me. So you lied to me. I omitted the truth. There's a difference." "Is there?" Cleo's voice cracked slightly. "I told you things, personal things. I trusted you, and I never betrayed that trust. You let me think you were someone safe." "I am safe," Jiwoo said quietly. "For you. I would never hurt you, Cleo." She wanted to believe him. Despite everything, despite the lies, despite the danger, despite the fact that her quiet maintenance man was actually one of the most powerful criminals in the city, She wanted to believe him, but trust, once broken, was hard to rebuild. "I need time," she said finally, "to think, to process this." Jiwoo nodded, though she could see the disappointment in his eyes. "I understand." Cleo gathered her purse and jacket, her movements mechanical. At the elevator, she turned back to look at him. "That man, Chulmin, he threatened me because of you." "I won't let anything happen to you." "You can't promise that." "I can," Jiwoo said, and there was something in his voice, a certainty that was both comforting and terrifying. "I will." As the elevator doors closed between them, Cleo caught one last glimpse of his face. He looked like a man who'd just lost something precious, and despite her fear, despite her confusion, despite everything that had just been turned upside down, Cleo felt like she'd lost something precious too. Cleo didn't sleep that night. She paced her tiny studio apartment, her mind churning through everything she thought she knew about Jiwoo Han. The news articles painted him as a ghost, a man who operated in shadows, whose organization was suspected of everything from money laundering to arms dealing, but who had never been successfully prosecuted for anything. The man she'd been talking to for weeks was gentle, thoughtful. He'd brought her a coffee mug and listened to her problems like they mattered. How could those two people be the same? By morning, she'd made a decision. She would go to work, act normal, and pretend the conversation in the lobby had never happened. Maybe Jiwoo would respect her need for space. Maybe Chulmin would lose interest and move on to other targets. Maybe she could go back to being invisible. But when she arrived at Horizon Tower, Daniel was waiting for her with a stack of termination papers. "I'm sorry, Cleo," he said, though he didn't look sorry at all. "Budget cuts. Your position is being eliminated effective immediately." Cleo stared at the papers, her hands trembling slightly. "Budget cuts? You hired 2 new assistants last month. Different department, different budget. This is about last night, isn't it?" "About what happened in the lobby." Daniel's expression flickered. "I don't know what you're talking about." But Cleo could see the lie in his eyes. Someone had gotten to him. Someone had made it clear that Cleo Brooks was a liability that needed to be removed. "You can't do this," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "I've never missed a day, never made a serious mistake. My performance reviews are irrelevant. This is a business decision." Daniel slid a pen across the desk. "Sign the papers and you'll get 2 weeks severance. Make a fuss and you'll get nothing." Cleo looked down at the termination agreement, her vision blurring with tears of rage and frustration. 3 years of her life, 3 years of being the perfect employee, of absorbing abuse and fixing other people's mistakes, and it could all be erased with a signature. She thought about her rent, due in 2 weeks, her student loans, the medical bills from her emergency room visit last year when she couldn't afford a regular doctor. She signed the papers. 20 minutes later, she was standing on the sidewalk outside Horizon Tower with a cardboard box containing the few personal items from her desk. The travel mug Jiwoo had given her sat on top, a reminder of a kindness that now felt like a lie. "Cleo." She turned to find Jiwoo approaching from the parking garage, dressed in his maintenance coveralls again. But now that she knew who he really was, the disguise seemed almost absurd. How had she ever believed that a man who moved with such controlled authority was just a building maintenance worker? "I heard what happened," he said, his expression grim. "I'm going to fix this." "Don't." Cleo's voice was sharp. "Don't you dare. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Your world touching mine, and mine getting destroyed in the process. Chulmin did this to get to me. That makes it my responsibility. No, it makes it my consequence. There's a difference." Jiwoo stepped closer, and Cleo could see the frustration in his dark eyes. "Let me help you. I can get you another job, a better job, somewhere safe." "Safe?" Cleo laughed bitterly. "Nothing about you is safe, Jiwoo. You're a walking target, and anyone who gets close to you becomes a target too. It doesn't have to be that way." "Doesn't it? How many people in your life have been hurt because of who you are? How many people have paid the price for getting close to you?" Jiwoo's jaw tightened, and Cleo knew her words had hit their mark. "That's different." "Is it? Or are you just telling yourself that, Because you want something you can't have. They stared at each other across the sidewalk, the morning rush hour flowing around them like water around stones. Cleo could see the pain in Jiwoo's expression, and part of her wanted to take back her harsh words. But the larger part of her, the part that had learned to survive by being careful, by avoiding risks, by never trusting too much, knew she was right. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "for what happened to us. But I can't be part of your world." She turned and walked away, her cardboard box clutched against her chest like armor. She didn't look back, but she could feel Jiwoo watching her until she disappeared around the corner. Cleo spent the next 3 days applying for jobs and trying to forget the way Jiwoo had looked when she'd walked away from him. She told herself she'd made the right choice, the smart choice, the safe choice. But safety felt a lot like loneliness. On Thursday evening, she was walking home from a particularly disastrous job interview when she noticed the car, a black sedan, following about half a block behind her. When she turned left, it turned left. When she stopped to look in a shop window, it pulled over and waited. Cleo's mouth went dry. She thought about calling the police, but what would she say? That she was being followed by someone who might be connected to organized crime, that she'd gotten involved with a mafia boss, and now she was afraid for her life. Instead, she ducked into a crowded coffee shop and called the only person she could think of. Jiwoo answered on the first ring. "Cleo? What's wrong?" "I think someone's following me." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "A black car. It's been behind me for 6 blocks. Where are you?" "Cafe Luna on 5th Street. Stay there. Don't leave. Don't go outside. Don't talk to anyone you don't know. I'm coming." The line went dead. Cleo found a table in the back corner of the cafe and tried to look casual while keeping an eye on the street. The black sedan was parked across the road, its windows too tinted to see inside. 15 minutes later, Jiwoo walked through the cafe door. But this wasn't the maintenance worker, or even the man in jeans and a jacket she'd seen in the lobby. This was Jiwoo Han in his true form, expensive suit, perfect posture, an aura of controlled danger that made every conversation in the cafe pause for a beat. He scanned the room until he found her, then crossed to her table with purposeful strides. "Are you hurt?" he asked, sliding into the chair across from her. "No, just scared." Jiwoo's gaze flicked to the window, and Cleo saw his expression harden. "The car's gone. It was there a minute ago." "I know. My people moved it." Cleo blinked. "Your people?" "I don't travel alone, Cleo, especially not when someone I care about is in danger." The casual way he said it, "someone I care about," made her chest tight. "You can't keep protecting me. This proves my point. Being around you puts me at risk. Being around me is the only thing keeping you alive right now." The blunt statement hit Cleo like a physical blow. "What do you mean?" Jiwoo leaned forward, his voice low and urgent. "Chulmin isn't just trying to get to me through you, he's trying to start a war, and he's decided that you're the perfect catalyst. I don't understand. He knows I care about you. He knows that hurting you would provoke me into doing something reckless, something that would give him an excuse to move against my organization." Cleo felt sick. "So I'm bait. You're leverage, which means you're valuable to him alive, but only as long as you're useful. And when I stop being useful?" Jiwoo's expression was answer enough. Cleo stared down at her untouched coffee, her mind racing. "What do you want me to do?" "Come with me. Let me keep you safe until this is over." "And then what? I go back to my life and pretend none of this happened?" "Then you decide what you want your life to look like." Cleo looked up at him, searching his face for any sign of deception, but all she saw was sincerity and something deeper that made her pulse quicken. "If I do this," she said slowly, "I need the truth. All of it. No more lies, no more omissions. I need to know exactly who you are and what I'm getting into." Jiwoo nodded. "You'll have it. And I need your word that you'll let me go when this is over. No strings, no obligations, no guilt trips." Something flickered across his features, pain maybe or regret, but he nodded again. "You have my word." Cleo took a deep breath, knowing she was about to step off a cliff with no idea where she'd land. "Okay," she said, "but I have one more condition." "Name it." "When this is over, when I'm safe and Chulmin is dealt with, you tell me why you really stayed in that parking lot the night we met. And I want the truth, not some noble speech about protecting your building." Jiwoo's eyes softened, and for a moment Cleo caught a glimpse of the man who'd listened to her problems and brought her coffee mugs. "The truth is," he said quietly, "I stayed because for the first time in years, someone looked at me and saw a person instead of a weapon, and I wasn't ready to give that up." Cleo's breath caught. "Jiwoo." "But you're right to be careful," he continued. "You're right to be scared, because caring about you has already changed me, and I'm not sure either of us is ready for what that means." Before Cleo could respond, Jiwoo stood and extended his hand. "Come on," he said. "Let's get you somewhere safe, and then I'll tell you everything." Cleo looked at his outstretched hand, knowing that taking it would change everything. She took it anyway. Jiwoo's idea of somewhere safe turned out to be a penthouse apartment in the most exclusive building in the city. Cleo stood in the middle of the living room, taking in the floor-to-ceiling windows, the minimalist furniture, the art that probably cost more than she'd made in the past 5 years. Everything was pristine, elegant, and utterly impersonal. "This is where you live?" she asked. "One of the places." Jiwoo moved to the windows and adjusted the blinds, his movements efficient and practiced. "My security team has swept the building. You'll be safe here." "For how long?" "As long as it takes." Cleo set down her purse and turned to face him. "You promised me the truth, all of it." Jiwoo nodded, loosening his tie. For the first time since she'd known him, he looked tired. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. Start with who you really are." Jiwoo was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the city lights. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "I was born in Seoul. My father was connected, not Mafia exactly, but close enough. When I was 12, he moved our family to New York, said it was for better opportunities, but really it was because he'd made enemies back home." Cleo settled onto the couch, sensing this was going to be a long story. "My father died when I was 16. Car accident, though I've never been sure it was really an accident. My mother couldn't handle the life here, so she went back to Korea, left me with my father's associates." "They raised you? They used me?" Jiwoo's jaw tightened. "I was smart, I was loyal, and I was expendable. Perfect qualities for someone they needed to do their dirty work. But you weren't expendable. No, I was better at it than they expected. Better at reading people, at strategy, at staying alive. By the time I was 25, I was running my own crew. By 30, I'd taken over the entire East Coast operation." Cleo tried to reconcile this story with the man who'd sat with her on the roof, sharing chips and listening to her dreams. "And Horizon Tower?" "Legitimate business, mostly." Jiwoo turned away from the window. "I bought it 3 years ago as part of an effort to clean up my operations, move away from the more violent aspects of the business." "But you still run a criminal organization." "Yes. And people still get hurt because of what you do." Jiwoo's expression darkened. "Yes." Cleo absorbed this, trying to process the complexity of the man in front of her. "What about Chulmin? What's his story?" "Chulmin Kang runs a rival organization, smaller than mine but ambitious. He's been trying to expand into my territory for months, but he needed an excuse to justify an all-out war to his backers. And I'm that excuse. You're that excuse." Cleo felt a chill run down her spine. What happens if he gets what he wants, if he starts this war? A lot of people die, including innocent people who get caught in the crossfire, including me. Jiwoo's eyes met hers, and she saw something fierce and protective flash across his features. "Not you. Never you. You can't promise that." "I can promise that I'll die before I let anyone hurt you." The intensity in his voice made Cleo's breath catch. "Jiwoo, I know you think I'm a monster," he said, moving closer. "I know you think I'm dangerous and selfish and wrong for you, and you're probably right about all of that. I don't think you're a monster." "Then what do you think I am?" Cleo looked at him, really looked, taking in the sharp lines of his face, the careful control in his posture, the vulnerability he was trying so hard to hide. "I think you're a man who's been alone for so long that you've forgotten how to let people in," she said softly. "I think you're scared that if you show people who you really are, they'll leave, so you keep everyone at a distance and tell yourself it's for their protection." Jiwoo went very still. "And what if they do leave? What if letting them in just gives them more reasons to run? Then at least you'll know you tried." They stared at each other across the elegant living room, the weight of unspoken feelings hanging between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Cleo's phone buzzed, breaking the moment. She glanced at the screen and frowned. "Unknown number," she said. "Don't answer it." But the phone kept buzzing, insistent and somehow ominous. Finally, Cleo swiped to accept the call. "Cleo Brooks?" The voice was smooth, familiar. "Chulmin." Jiwoo was beside her in an instant, his expression murderous. "Hello, sweetheart. I hope you're enjoying your new accommodations." Jiwoo always did have excellent taste in real estate. Cleo's blood ran cold. "How did you get this number?" "I have my ways. More importantly, I have something you might want to see." "I'm hanging up. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Not unless you want your friend Daniel to have a very unpleasant evening." Cleo's hand tightened on the phone. "What are you talking about?" "Check your email. I've sent you something interesting." Cleo looked at Jiwoo, who nodded grimly, and gestured for her to put the call on speaker. "What do you want, Chulmin?" Jiwoo's voice was deadly calm. "Just a conversation, face to face, no weapons, no backup, just two businessmen discussing a mutually beneficial arrangement." "And if I refuse?" "Then I'm afraid Mr. Rhodes will become an example of what happens to people who get caught in the middle of our disagreement." Cleo opened her email with shaking fingers. The message contained a single photo. Daniel tied to a chair in what looked like an abandoned warehouse, his face bruised and his eyes wide with terror. "You bastard," Cleo whispered. Now. No need for name-calling. This is just business." Chulmin's voice was cheerful, almost conversational. "Jiwoo knows the rules. You want to play in the big leagues. Sometimes innocent people get hurt." "Oh, Daniel isn't innocent," Jiwoo said. "He's the one who's been selling you information about the building." "True, but he's also Cleo's friend, isn't he? Her former boss, someone she cares about." Cleo closed her eyes, hating that Chulmin was right. Despite everything Daniel had put her through, she didn't want him to die because of her. "What do you want?" she asked. "Simple. Jiwoo meets me at the old pier warehouse in 2 hours, alone. We have our conversation and Mr. Rhodes goes home to his family." "And if he doesn't?" "Then Mr. Rhodes becomes a very unfortunate casualty of war." The line went dead. Cleo stared at her phone, her hands trembling. "You can't go. It's obviously a trap." "Of course it's a trap." Jiwoo was already moving toward what she assumed was his bedroom. "But he's right about one thing. Daniel is going to die if I don't show up. So we call the police. And tell them what? That a man they can't touch has kidnapped someone as part of a gang war they can't prove exists?" Jiwoo emerged with a gun holster, which he strapped under his jacket with practiced efficiency. "By the time they figure out what's happening, Daniel will be dead." "Then we find another way." "There is no other way." Jiwoo's voice was gentle but firm. "This is what I do, Cleo. This is who I am. This is who you choose to be." Jiwoo stopped, his hand on the door handle. "You're right, and I choose to be someone who doesn't let innocent people die when I can prevent it. Even if it means walking into a trap that could get you killed. Especially then." Cleo felt tears prick her eyes. "I can't lose you, not when I'm just starting to understand who you really are." Jiwoo turned back to her, his expression soft. "You're not going to lose me. You don't know that. I know that I have something to come back to now. That changes everything." He crossed to her, cupping her face gently in his hands. "Cleo, I need you to promise me something." "What?" "If something goes wrong tonight, if I don't come back, I need you to take the money in the safe and disappear. Go somewhere Chulmin can't find you. Start over. Jiwoo, promise me." Cleo looked into his dark eyes, seeing the fear he was trying so hard to hide. "Only if you promise me something in return. Anything. Promise me you'll come back. Promise me you'll fight to come back. Jiwoo leaned his forehead against hers, his breath warm against her skin. "I promise." And then he kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative, as if he was asking permission. But when Cleo's hands fisted in his jacket, pulling him closer, the kiss deepened into something desperate and hungry, and full of all the words they hadn't said. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I have to go," Jiwoo whispered. "I know." "Stay here. Don't leave the apartment. Don't answer the door for anyone. I know." He kissed her once more, quick and fierce, and then he was gone. Cleo sank onto the couch. Her fingers pressed to her lips and tried not to think about the possibility that she might never see him again. Cleo lasted exactly 47 minutes before she broke her promise. She'd tried to stay in the apartment. She'd paced the living room, stared out the windows, even attempted to distract herself with the books on Jiwoo's shelves. But every minute that passed felt like an eternity. And the thought of sitting safely in his penthouse while he walked into a trap made her feel sick. So she did what she'd always done when life became unbearable. She took action. Jiwoo had mentioned the old pier warehouse. Cleo had grown up in this city. She knew exactly where that was. And if Chulmin was planning an ambush, maybe there was something she could do to help. She grabbed her jacket and headed for the door, then stopped. If she was going to do this, she needed to be smart about it. Cleo found Jiwoo's laptop on his desk and quickly searched for the warehouse's layout. It was a sprawling complex of buildings right on the water, with multiple entrances and plenty of places for Chulmin's men to hide. But it also had something else, a security system that connected to the city's emergency services. Cleo pulled out her phone and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? I need to report a kidnapping in progress at the old pier warehouse on Dock Street. There are armed men holding someone against their will. Ma'am, can you confirm your location? I'm nearby. I saw them bring someone in. Please hurry. Cleo hung up before the dispatcher could ask more questions. It wasn't much, but maybe it would be enough to tip the scales in Jiwoo's favor. She was halfway to the elevator when her phone rang. Cleo. The voice was weak, strained. Daniel. Cleo, thank God. Listen to me very carefully. They let me make one call and I chose you. Daniel, where are you? Are you hurt? I'm okay for now. But Cleo, you have to listen. This whole thing, it's not what you think. Jiwoo isn't walking into a trap. Cleo's blood chilled. What do you mean? Chulmin doesn't want to kill him. He wants to make a deal. He's got information about a federal investigation into Jiwoo's organization. He's offering to make it disappear in exchange for territory rights. That doesn't make sense. Why kidnap you? Because he needed leverage to make sure Jiwoo would listen. But Cleo, there's something else, something worse. What? Chulmin knows about you. He knows how Jiwoo feels about you, and he's planning to use that. Cleo's heart hammered against her ribs. Use it how? He's going to offer Jiwoo a choice. Give up his territory, or watch you die. The phone slipped from Cleo's numb fingers, clattering to the floor. Chulmin didn't just want to start a war. He wanted to end it before it began, with Jiwoo's complete surrender. And Cleo was the key to making that happen. She grabbed her jacket and ran for the elevator. She had to get to the warehouse. She had to warn Jiwoo before it was too late. The pier warehouse was exactly as ominous as Cleo had expected. Dark, isolated, surrounded by empty shipping containers and the smell of salt water. She parked her borrowed car, Jiwoo's spare, taken from the building's garage, several blocks away, and approached on foot. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Good. Her 911 call had worked. Cleo crept around the perimeter of the main building, looking for a way in that wouldn't get her immediately caught. She found a broken window on the north side, partially hidden by stacked pallets. Inside, the warehouse was a maze of shadows and echoes. Cleo moved carefully, following the sound of voices toward the center of the building. She found them in a large open space near the loading docks. Jiwoo stood in the middle of the room, his hands visible but not raised, his posture alert but not aggressive. Chulmin faced him from about 20 feet away, flanked by 4 armed men. Daniel was tied to a chair off to one side, conscious but clearly beaten. Cleo crouched behind a stack of crates, close enough to hear but hopefully hidden from view. You came alone, Chulmin was saying. I'm impressed and a little surprised. You have something I want, Jiwoo replied, his voice calm. Let's make this simple. Oh, it's going to be very simple. Chulmin smiled. I'm going to make you an offer you can't refuse. I'm listening. The FBI has been building a case against your organization for 18 months. They have financial records, witness testimony, enough evidence to put you away for life. Jiwoo's expression didn't change, but Cleo saw his hands clench slightly. I have a contact inside the bureau, Chulmin continued. Someone who can make that evidence disappear, all of it. What do you want in return? Your territory, all of it. You walk away, retire to somewhere warm and sunny, and I take over your operations. And if I refuse? Chulmin's smile widened. Then the FBI gets an anonymous tip about where to find you, and your lovely Cleo gets to visit you in federal prison. Assuming, of course, that she survives the transition period. Cleo's breath caught. Even from her hiding spot, she could see the way Jiwoo's entire body went rigid at the threat. Cleo has nothing to do with this, Jiwoo said, his voice deadly quiet. Doesn't she? Come now, Jiwoo. Everyone knows you've gone soft for the pretty receptionist. It's almost romantic, really. The big bad Mafia boss brought down by love. Leave her out of this. I'm afraid that's not possible. You see, she's the only leverage I have that actually matters to you. Chulmin gestured to one of his men, who stepped forward with a tablet. Smile for the camera, Jiwoo. Cleo's watching. Cleo's blood turned to ice as she realized what was happening. Chulmin was live-streaming this confrontation, probably sending it directly to Jiwoo's apartment. He thought she was still there, safe and helpless, watching the man she cared about being forced to choose between his life's work and her safety. You have 10 seconds to decide, Chulmin said, your territory or her life. Cleo couldn't let this happen. She couldn't let Jiwoo sacrifice everything for her. She stood up. Actually, she said, stepping out from behind the crates, he has a third option. Every gun in the room swung toward her. Jiwoo's face went white. Cleo, what are you doing? He demanded. What I should have done from the beginning, she said, walking slowly toward the center of the room, taking control of my own life. Chulmin laughed. How touching. The damsel comes to rescue her knight. I'm not a damsel, Cleo said calmly. And he's not a knight. But you're definitely the villain in this story. Cleo, get out of here, but Jiwoo said urgently. Now. No. Cleo kept walking until she was standing beside him. I'm tired of running. Tired of being used as a weapon against the people I care about. How noble, Chulmin sneered, but ultimately pointless. Now I have both of you exactly where I want you. Do you? Cleo smiled. Because I'm pretty sure you're about to have a much bigger problem. As if on cue, the warehouse doors burst open and police officers flooded in, weapons drawn, shouting commands. FBI, everyone on the ground. Chaos erupted. Chulmin's men scattered, some trying to fight, others trying to flee. Gunshots echoed through the warehouse. Cleo felt Jiwoo's arm wrap around her, pulling her behind a concrete pillar as bullets flew. How? He shouted over the noise. I called 911, reported a kidnapping in progress. You were supposed to stay in the apartment. I never was very good at following orders. The firefight lasted less than 5 minutes. When the smoke cleared, 2 of Chulmin's men were down. 1 was in custody, and Chulmin himself was nowhere to be found. But Daniel was safe, and both Cleo and Jiwoo were alive. As the FBI agents secured the scene, Cleo found herself sitting on a crate, giving her statement to a detective who seemed remarkably unsurprised by the whole situation. You realized, the detective said, that your boyfriend is going to be in federal custody within the hour. Cleo's heart sank. For how long? That depends on a lot of factors. His cooperation, what evidence we can actually prove, whether his lawyer is as good as his reputation suggests. Cleo looked across the warehouse to where Jiwoo was talking quietly with another agent. Even in handcuffs, he carried himself with dignity. Their eyes met across the space, and he smiled at her. Not the careful, controlled smile she'd grown used to, but something real and warm and full of hope. He's not my boyfriend, Cleo told the detective. No? He's the man I'm in love with. There's a difference. The detective raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. An hour later, Cleo watched through the warehouse windows as Jiwoo was led to a federal transport vehicle. Just before he got in, He turned back to look at her one more time. Cleo pressed her hand to the glass and mouthed 3 words. "I'll be waiting." Jiwoo nodded, and then he was gone. But Cleo wasn't worried. She'd learned something important tonight. Love wasn't about being safe. It wasn't about avoiding risk or protecting yourself from pain. Love was about choosing to fight for something worth having. And Jiwoo Han was definitely worth fighting for. Years later, Cleo stood in the lobby of Horizon Tower, watching the morning rush hour flow around her like a familiar river. But this time, she wasn't behind the reception desk. This time, she wore a tailored suit and carried a briefcase, her natural hair styled in an elegant updo, and her confidence evident in every step. The building looked different now, brighter, more welcoming. The changes had started small: better lighting in the lobby, more comfortable seating areas, a coffee station for employees. But they'd grown into something bigger, a complete transformation of the corporate culture that had once made Cleo feel invisible. "Ms. Brooks?" A young woman approached her, tablet in hand. "The community outreach meeting is ready to begin." Cleo smiled. "Thank you, Sarah. I'll be right there." As the new director of community relations for Horizon Tower, Cleo had spent the past few years building programs that connected the building's corporate tenants with local nonprofits and social services. It was the kind of work she'd always dreamed of doing, helping people, making a difference, using her voice to advocate for those who needed it most. The irony wasn't lost on her that she'd found her calling in the same building where she'd once felt so powerless. "Cleo." She turned at the familiar voice, her heart doing the same little skip it had done for years now. Jiwoo stood near the elevator bank, dressed in a simple black suit, his hair slightly longer than she remembered, but his eyes just as warm. He looked good, rested, peaceful in a way she'd never seen before. "You're early," she said, walking toward him. "I was eager to see you." "You saw me yesterday." "Not nearly enough." Cleo laughed, the sound echoing in the marble lobby. Smooth talker. "I learned from the best." They stood close together, not quite touching, but sharing the same space with an ease that spoke of deep familiarity and hard-won trust. Jiwoo's legal troubles had taken 2 years to resolve. His cooperation with federal investigators had helped dismantle not just his own organization, but several others, including what remained of Chulmin's operation. In the end, he'd served 18 months in minimum security and emerged with a clean slate and a chance to build something new, something legitimate, something that honored both who he'd been and who he wanted to become. "How did the meeting go?" Cleo asked. "Better than expected. The city council approved the youth center proposal. Construction starts next month." Cleo's face lit up. "Jiwoo, that's wonderful." The youth center had been Jiwoo's idea, a place for at-risk teenagers to learn job skills, get tutoring, and find mentorship. It was being built in the neighborhood where he'd grown up, funded by the legitimate businesses he now ran and staffed by people who understood what it meant to need a second chance. "I couldn't have done it without you," he said softly. "Your proposal for the social services partnership was what convinced them. We make a good team, we do." They walked toward the elevator together, their shoulders brushing with each step. The easy intimacy between them had been hard-won, built through months of honest conversations, careful trust-building, and the kind of patience that came from knowing something was worth waiting for. "Are you nervous?" Cleo asked as they stepped into the elevator. "About tonight, terrified?" Cleo grinned. "Good. It means it matters to you." Tonight was the grand opening of the youth center, but it was also something else. Something Jiwoo had been planning for weeks, with the help of Cleo's friends, his business partners, and a jewelry designer who specialized in custom pieces. "Cleo," Jiwoo said as the elevator climbed toward the roof, "can I ask you something?" "Always." "That night in the parking lot when you first talked to me, did you ever imagine it would lead to this?" Cleo considered the question seriously. "You mean, did I imagine that venting to a stranger would lead to falling in love with a reformed Mafia boss who's now dedicated to community service and youth outreach?" "When you put it like that, it does sound rather unlikely." "Unlikely doesn't begin to cover it." Cleo turned to face him fully. "But did I imagine that the man who listened to me that night might be someone worth knowing, someone worth trusting, someone worth loving. The elevator dinged softly as they reached the roof. "Yeah," Cleo said, stepping out into the afternoon sunlight. "I think maybe I did." The rooftop had been transformed. What had once been Cleo's lonely refuge was now a garden space, complete with benches, flowering plants, and a small gazebo that overlooked the city. It was here that Jiwoo had first told her the complete truth about his past, here that they'd had their first real fight and their first real reconciliation, here that they'd learned to build something together that was stronger than either of them alone. "Cleo," Jiwoo said, his voice suddenly formal. She turned to find him down on one knee, a small velvet box in his hands. "Oh my God," she whispered. "I know this isn't traditional," he said, his voice slightly shaky. "I know our story isn't the kind they write fairy tales about. But Cleo Brooks, you saw something in me that I didn't even know existed. You believed I could be better before I believed it myself. You stayed when you should have run, and you fought for us when I was ready to give up." Tears blurred Cleo's vision. "I can't promise you a simple life," Jiwoo continued. "I can't promise that my past won't sometimes complicate our future. But I can promise that I will love you with everything I have, for as long as I live. I can promise that I will never stop trying to be the man you saw in me that first night." He opened the box, revealing a ring that was elegant and unique, a diamond surrounded by smaller stones, in a setting that looked like it had been designed specifically for her. "Cleo Brooks, will you marry me?" Cleo looked down at him, this man who had started as a stranger in a parking lot and become the center of her world. She thought about the journey that had brought them here, the fear, the danger, the moments of doubt, and the moments of absolute certainty. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and clear. "Yes, Jiwoo-han, I will marry you." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Cleo realized that sometimes the best love stories weren't the ones that started with love at first sight. Sometimes they were the ones that started with two broken people finding each other in the dark and deciding to build something beautiful together. "I love you," Jiwoo said, standing and pulling her into his arms. "I love you too," Cleo replied, "and I'm not going anywhere." "Promise?" "Promise." As the sun set over the city, casting golden light across the rooftop garden, Cleo Brooks and Jiwoo-han held each other close and looked toward a future that was uncertain but full of possibility. They'd learned that love wasn't about finding someone perfect, it was about finding someone worth fighting for. And they'd both found exactly that. Thank you for staying until the end. Korean Mafia Lovers has many more passionate and thrilling stories waiting for you. Subscribe to the channel to never miss our latest uploads. Your support helps us create these incredible love stories that touch your heart.